Welcome to the Dropship Podcast, where you'll learn how to build and grow a high-ticket dropshipping business and hear stories from successful e-commerce entrepreneurs. Let's kick this thing off. Hey, welcome to the Dropship Podcast. Another live one. Again, we're on video. If you're on Spotify, if you're on YouTube, hello. I'm glad we're doing this in person once again. We might say this on every show that we record while we're here. This is just too much fun.
Yeah, it's wild, man. This is nearly 200 episodes without seeing each other's faces.
Yeah,
like,
it's wild.
It's still.
If you see me looking up there, it's because it's a screen. I'm so used to seeing John's face on a screen that I'm actually having trouble doing this. This is cool.
Yeah, I hope I'm not too scary in person.
Stare right through the camera. So today's show, navigating legal landmines. We get so many questions of what are the steps I need to take before I even launch? And I think I see too many students waiting for these steps to be completed before they do anything, which is, to me, even worse. So I just want to touch on what I think you need to do. Again, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Neither one of us are actually giving you professional advice here. We're just giving you advice from our experience doing this.
Yeah, right. And aside from the other thing that kind of made me want to talk about this again, and I think we have talked about this previously in a podcast, at least in some way, shape or form, is you'll also see a lot from people who aren't even in our course. They're just might be listening to this podcast, who use the legal stuff as a reason not to do anything, which I think really sits in front of other fears that they might have about getting started. But I kind of was just like, man, I want to clear this up once and for all. This is like such a small thing in your overall journey that I'm not going to say it's not worth thinking about, because you do have to think about it, but it should never be something that I think creates a stumbling block for somebody who's right at the beginning and wants to go out and make a change in their life and do the things that, building a business, building a good business can help you to do.
So I'm going to speak only to America. I don't know anywhere else.
I'll do Australia. Okay.
Great. And if you're wondering, we often get questions about the UK. Is the UK different somehow? That you need special things in the UK that John and Ben can't provide. The reality is, this is the small part that might be slightly different in your country versus my country versus your country. But we have students in every country in our course at this point, I think, and some studs in the UK. If you haven't listened to the episode with Jaden, go look back a few episodes back, probably from this show, is an episode with someone in the UK doing quite well. And Jaden has helped a lot of people in the UK.
I can tell you straight up, it's very similar to Australia, unsurprisingly, both being in the Commonwealth and all that sort of weird stuff that you Americans probably don't understand.
We should go into it. I didn't know this fact, so let's just go there. How did Australia come to be as we know it, John?
No, I'm really not going to go into that.
No, I think it's fascinating. The story of America is an interesting one. We get taught a different story in school, but we came here and exterminated some people who lived here, and that's how it came to be. But we came over on boats looking to explore, whereas Australia, I believe, was where they sent the prisoners from the UK. Is that accurate?
Well, it was not the only location in the world either, by the way. But
where else did they send them?
I don't know. But I mean, England, the UK, they used to have a practice called transporting. So if you were found guilty of a crime, you'd be transported to one of their colonies. I think they did it to anywhere really that was a new colony, right? That they were trying to colonize. And of course, when people are colonizing countries, some of them die, right? Because either it's inhospitable, there's not enough food, there's disease, they get killed by the people who are already there that they're trying to kill, which was usually the practice of the English. And so, you need some cannon fodder to get through that, don't you? So send the convicts, right? Send the people who got caught stealing a loaf of bread. And literally you could get transported for stealing a loaf of bread to feed, back in London or wherever, where you were starving anyway. So, a portion of the people who went to Australia, white people who went to Australia, were convicts, for sure, or a large portion.
I had never sat and thought through the why. And the fact that they were a bunch of us are going to lose our lives on the process of colonizing this land. Let's send some people whose lives matter less than the people we want to survive this.
Well, I mean, you think about it any hazardous thing you're going to do. I mean, it's like war, right? I mean, if you're the king, and you're I'm going to go and fight this other army. You're not I'm going to send in my best soldiers first to suck up the bullets. Oh yeah, you're I got some people I care less about. They can go first.
It reminds me of a South Park. Do you remember the movie Bigger, Longer, and Uncut? And they talk about going to war with Canada, and they're like, Operation Stand Behind the Darkies, and they send the entire black unit up. Oh my God, South Park. The only ones who can tell those jokes nowadays, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense though, right? When you think about it that way. With the convicts, I mean.
Yeah,
Not the South Park episode.
All right, let's get back to legal landmines. So in the U.S., I think oftentimes we have seen, and I saw it this week, which is I think why we ended up having it in here, people are waiting on an LLC. And not only waiting on an LLC, they're waiting on someone to do an LLC for them. And I'm going to be dead honest and say, I don't think you need an LLC to get started. I didn't have one to get started. You can start as a sole proprietor. You do need to get an EIN. And so if you just go to Google and say, how do I get an EIN? You'll figure that out. It's very easy. It's free. It might take a couple days for the U.S. government to get back to you. It's usually pretty quick, but you don't actually need an LLC.
No, you don't. You can get one later, right? And it's pretty easy just to bring one in later, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can transition anytime that you want to. It is simply a legal structure that maybe limits your liability to a point, but I don't think you need it in the beginning of a dropshipping business at all. Let alone, you definitely don't need to go to a company who's going to charge you to do it for you. Like in Wisconsin, it was very, very easy. I want to say it cost me $120, somewhere around there. But I just registered with the state of Wisconsin. I put in the information they asked for. I filled out what was needed for the articles of organization, and that was it. And a couple days later, I got an email and I got something in the mail and everything was taken care of.
Yeah. And so it's like pretty much a very similar story in Australia, right? You can start as, we call them sole traders. It's the same thing, sole proprietor, sole trader. Or you could have a company. In Australia, it costs you a lot more to set up a company, and you usually need an accountant's help to do it. But it's completely unnecessary. Like there are benefits of obviously to having a company structure, whether it's from a legal asset protection or taxation, possibly. But until you're making money, until you've made a sale, like you don't need that stuff, right? And you in Australia as well, you can transition from being a sole trader, which you just need to go and register for an ABN, Australian Business Number. I think it costs $30 to do that. Once again, just Google register for ABN, and you're going to go to the ASIC website where you do that. I was a sole trader. I still have businesses even now that I run under a sole tradership. So it's perfectly fine to get started, and it's so easy to do.
I think it can be a crutch for some people. But they're putting this out in front. They think they need it, or they've been told they need it by someone. Like in my journey, I got a lot of people offering advice who have never started a business, who have never done anything. A lot of them were like, you have to have an LLC. Why? I would just challenge you to ask the person who told you that why. I don't think you need one to start. But where this came up, I think earlier this week in the Facebook group, was someone waiting to upload products. They had called suppliers, they had gotten approved, and the supplier was like, hey, I either need an LLC or another thing that you're going to have to get is a, sign up for sales tax in the state that you're in. You're going to have to get sales tax exemption. Even if your state doesn't have sales tax, you're likely going to need to sign up for some things. This is extremely complicated. We had someone on the show talk about this.
True.
We have a whole section in the course on this now because it's so complicated. But they were waiting to upload products to move forward until they had that information. And I was like, well, why don't you upload this while you wait for it, then hand it to them. And the moment you hand it to them, you're good to go. You can run ads. So I think some people are doing the same thing with this LLC in the beginning. They're like, okay, I'll get started when, and it's the LLC that is the when for them. And believe me, that I'll get started when shows up more and more and more as you go down the journey. Start now. That's my advice. I don't think anyone needs an LLC. Conversely, if you have one, we often get the question, can I just run another business under this LLC? Do I need a new LLC? I don't think you need a new one. If you have an EIN with that, you could definitely get started. And so I would recommend just getting started. I think that's going to be our advice that comes away from this show is don't let any of this stuff hold you up, because some of it's not necessary. And even if it is, there are steps that you can take. You can identify the person. You can identify the products that person is buying. You can start a Shopify website. You can buy your domain. You can do a lot of things prior to waiting for any of this legal stuff that you may or may not need.
Yep. And it's also, I think some people also worry about this stuff. Like, what if I get it wrong? What if I do this? What if I do that? Once again, I mean, it's not something, don't want to say it's not something you can get wrong, but like the answers are very simple. These are not complicated answers, and the answers are the same for literally 99% of people who start here. Like, as in, they don't need some special setup. Their circumstances are not that different. They just can't all start the same way with this sort of legal and tax sort of setup. And in Australia, the tax thing, sales tax you don't even have to worry about until you've made $75,000 in sales in a single financial year. So, like, that's so far, down the track from when you're at the point of starting, that's months and months away, right? So, once again, shouldn't be any reason. You don't even think about it in the beginning.
Yeah, the tax stuff is interesting. It was a worry for me, I think. It might have still been a worry for me until we interviewed the gentleman who put stuff in our course for us. And then I asked the question, what happens if we get this wrong? And he was like, they'll send you a letter and like they'll ask for the money back. You know what I mean? And then like they'll work with you over time to get that paid back. And it's not like you murdered somebody. It's not like you're going to prison over this stuff. It's more like, hey, let's get this figured out and get this solved. Unless of course you're being egregious. So in the beginning, I think everything's intimidating. Choosing your niche is intimidating. Choosing the person you're going to serve is intimidating. Signing up for Shopify is intimidating. I hope this podcast lets you realize that this stuff's not that intimidating. Is it hard? Yeah, honestly, it is a little bit hard, and it's mostly hard because states' websites are from the 1980s. You can't call somebody to get some help. Like it's difficult to work through how to do some of this stuff. But fortunately, at this point in the world we live in, there's a YouTube video on that, or there's a podcast on that, or there's a website on that, or detailing you how to do this. So I can give you the exact steps for Wisconsin, but the steps in Minnesota are going to be just slightly different on how you do that. Same with Florida or any other state. They're going to be slightly different. But the process itself is quite simple. But again, I don't think you need an LLC. You just simply need to declare you are a business owner, right? And some states might make you register for that. And then you're going to want to sign up for sales and use tax in your state, be saying that you are a reseller.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well, if you're finding yourself held up by these things in the beginning, like mentally, maybe just check in with yourself and think about, what are you really worried about here? Like, you know what I mean? Because sometimes I feel like people put these things out in front because it gives them an excuse. Like, oh, I'm not sure about the tax, so I better not do anything. But really, are you really actually that worried about just that one thing? Or is there something maybe a little bit deeper sitting behind that you might need to, work on, think about, bring to the surface as to why you're not getting started?
Yeah, Elliot kind of brought this up at the event, that a lot of these little things are places that you can then not do it, even though this isn't that hard to solve. You can then not do it and then say, well, the tax stuff was hard. If I would have figured it out, I would have had a really big store. But since I couldn't figure it out, I just couldn't get it. Like, there's so many of these that you can put in front, and your ego can say, I didn't actually try. But if I would have tried, I would have been successful. And it's just another form of self-sabotage that I think we're all capable of doing at times.
Yeah, totally.
So, to put a bow on this, I would just say legal landmines, there aren't really in dropshipping. Like, it's not something that can get you in loads and loads of trouble. It shouldn't be something that holds you up from starting. And it definitely should be something you should just cast aside.
Thanks for listening to the Dropship Podcast. You can find all the show notes for this episode at dropshippodcast.com. And if you're ready to take the next step in your dropshipping journey, we invite you to join us inside Dropship Breakthru, where John and I will walk you through step by step in starting your own high-ticket dropshipping e-commerce business. But that's not all. Dropship Breakthru will also teach you everything you'll need to know to grow your business and take it to the next level. So head over to dropshipbreakthru.com and sign up for our free training that will help you take the first steps towards building and growing your own profitable high-ticket dropshipping business.